Hey there, and welcome to the RV Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Joshua Sheehan, and this is episode number 253. The RV Entrepreneur is a community for people who are interested in downsizing their life, creating remote income, and working from anywhere. Our goal is to support and inspire entrepreneurs in and around the RV community. And today we have the pleasure of talking with Taylor Cluster. Taylor and her fiancé Scott have spent the last 3 years living the nomad life while traveling around North America. After hitting the road, Taylor found out that she had a bit more free time to pursue her passion of writing, decided to sit down and write a novel in one of her favorite genres, murder mystery. In this episode, Taylor and I talk about what it's like to write a fiction book based on real-life events that she and Scott experienced on the road, the challenges of writing, editing, and publishing your first book, and some of the eerie experiences that they had on the road that made it into the storyline. We also talk a little bit about the feeling that you get as a published author, and if it was everything that Taylor had envisioned it to be when she thought of becoming an author. And finally, we wrap up with a little bit of a reveal on the campground that they're building in Montrose, Colorado, where we're going to have the 2022 RV Entrepreneur Summit. And with that, let's jump into the show. Taylor, welcome to the RV Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm excited to have you on today. We met at the RVE Summit last year. I was pretty intrigued that when it came time to talk about how you guys had partially funded your full-time travels, you're like, I wrote a book. Like, wow, that's awesome. Give me a brief rundown of your history. Who is Taylor? And just a brief synopsis of your book.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. It's funny to still hear people say, I wrote a book, and for me to say that myself. Back in 2019, I was a preschool teacher and enjoying it. I still, to this day, love working with kids, but I was ready for a change, kind of similar to a lot of people's stories. They were looking for something different. They weren't wild about what they were doing, needed a change. Luckily, Scott, my partner, also was ready for a life change, and he actually suggested we buy an RV and hit the road. And I think he said it sort of jokingly and sort of wanted to gauge what my response would be. And to his surprise, I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. Like, we're not happy completely with what we're doing and we love to adventure. So once you get the RV, I'll believe it's real and we'll move in and do this adventure. And sure enough, a couple months later after that conversation, we got an RV and renovated it and hit the road full time. We were not like a lot of people in the sense that we did not save up before this, since it was kind of a spur of the moment thing for us. We didn't spend years saving up for this trip. So we actually sold Scott's house, and that was the main source of income for us for a long time. Once we hit the road, we were like, well, we don't want to spend all of our savings, in case this doesn't go well or we want to end at some point. We still want to have some savings in the bank to buy a house or whatever the situation may be. So we're like, well, we need to make money somehow. What can we do? What's something we enjoy that we can maybe make money on the side? And I'd always loved writing. That's just something my whole life I've been interested in. Ever since I was younger, I would write in journals, make up stories all the time. My favorite course in high school was creative writing, but it was never something I sat down to actually pursue as a career choice. Mm-hmm. And he knew this. He knew that I enjoyed writing and said, well, why don't you write a book? And I was like, that's a good idea. I do like writing. I've always wanted to write a book. I feel like a lot of people say that, but never had the time to actually sit down and do it. When you're working full time and you have other hobbies, it's hard to be like, let me sit down, focus, and do this project. And now I finally had that opportunity to sit down and focus on it, and dove right in. And it took a little while to figure out exactly what I wanted to write. And he kind of helped me in the first couple steps, like, what do you want to write about? What type of things do you want to share with people? And eventually I landed on suspense nonfiction, because that's what I gravitate towards in general. Podcasts, TV shows, true crime. That is my realm of interest. So it made sense that that's what I gravitated towards when I wrote a book. And I wrote a suspense nonfiction book called the #VanLifeMurders.
Is it nonfiction?
I always say nonfiction because I guess coming from the writer, it's technically fiction and nonfiction. And I say that because there's parts in the book that I actually took from our journey that is real.
Gotcha.
So there's true stories within it, but the synopsis as a whole is fiction.
Got it. It's got parts of it that are based on true life, and then there's a story. You tied it all together.
Yes, so it's
Gotcha.
intertwined with real and not real.
Nice. So you're living off of savings from the sale of Scott's house. You're traveling
Mhm.
around. How long into your full-time journey was it before you started to get serious and actually put words onto a paper?
It was about a year, I'd say. When we first started, we kind of toyed around with the idea of YouTube and Instagram doing the influencer type thing or content creating.
Mm-hmm.
And we sort of realized neither one of us do well in front of the camera. We're introverted extroverts. And when I say that, I mean, when people meet us, they think we're really extroverted, but we're actually really introverted individuals. And the idea of standing in front of a camera was just not ideal to either one of us. We tried it out and neither one of us did well. I think it was like the pressure was there, even though it's just a camera, but you know, other people are going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like, well, maybe we step back from content creating and think about other things we could do. And so a year went by, and that's when he said, well, why don't you try writing a book and see if maybe we can bring in some extra income? You know, we weren't expecting it to be a great amount, but just a little bit. Every little bit helps in this
Mm-hmm.
life. I mean, if it can pay for your gas that week, worth it.
Mm-hmm. And so was sitting down to write a book with the intention of selling it and creating income harder or easier than I thought it would be?
I think it was harder in the sense that I love writing, I love sharing with people our story. But when you write a book, it's almost like writing in a journal. It's very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this was even hard to share with Scott too. He was the first, technically, the editor for it. So when I would write, he'd read it and check it over. And it was hard having somebody else read what you wrote. There's something personal about writing, and when you put it out there, it's very nerve wracking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even now it's hard to describe that to people until you've done it. Some people I think do it really easily. For me, it's you're putting all of your information out there. Even if it's things you've made up, it still came from you, your mind. So when you share it with other people, you're worried about what they're going to think. So it was a lot harder in terms of just getting it out there. And then income wise, because we were not content creators, because we were just your average couple traveling, not many people knew who we were. So it's not like we had a following where when I put the book out, we had hundreds of people rushing to buy it. We really had to put work into marketing the book and reaching out to people we didn't know to help us market the book. And that was a bit of a challenge, being technically nobodies and putting something out there hoping you're going to make income. And luckily it came with time. I felt like it was successful the first time I had a complete stranger, reach out to me and say they found my book and bought my book and enjoyed it. And that was the moment that I was like, okay, this is good. This is good. We're getting somewhere. We started making a little money on it, but it definitely took a lot to get there.
How did you decide on what stories you would include and would not include, and then on your title?
So the title's a funny thing because when we came up with it, Scott sort of helped me with it. We were like, oh, the hashtag van life murders, because it is related to influencers, which is where we got hashtag, because this is when hashtags became the way of social media and how
Mm-hmm.
you find things on social media. So we knew we were going to target the younger audience. This is geared towards the younger travelers and readers. So we're like, hashtag, automatically, people are going to read that and know it's related to the social media world. And van life was a huge thing. So we were like, well, let's put these things together. People are going to find the title and they're going to be interested. Now, something we didn't think about is that a lot of van lifers probably read the title and think, I'm not reading that because that sounds scary. I don't want to hear anything about people being murdered in the van life world. So we had to kind of put another version out there saying, yes, it is a murder mystery book, but like any book, you got to read between the lines and realize that there's other things that we're sharing, such as how to be safe when traveling alone, especially being a woman traveling alone. There's little things in there that are nodding towards here's what you should and shouldn't do when traveling alone. So that was That was a challenge that we faced when we first put it out that we didn't completely think about,
Hmm.
because when you're the one writing it and putting out there, you know that stuff is in the book.
Sure.
But when someone just reads the title, they're not going to know any of that.
Yeah, I could see that as being a challenge for sure. Of your target audience is van lifers, and they're the ones who are like,
Right.
yeah, no, I don't need any more ideas in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Which is also why it was fun to tie in some things that did happen to us on the road that were a little on the creepy side or eerie side. And I think part of camping sometimes when you're out boondocking in the middle of nowhere, or you're in a forest site and you're all by yourself, it's just a little eerie when you walk outside in the middle of the night and it's dark and it's silent. And I think a lot of people can relate to, even people who don't travel full time. If you've gone camping, you can relate to being out in the middle of nowhere and feeling alone, but not alone at the same time. So I kind of add stories in there that were, you hear something in the distance, but later you find out it's just a deer. But in that moment, you're terrified that someone's coming after you. So it's just little stuff like that that happened to us along the way that I put in there that people who have traveled or camped can relate to 100%.
All right. So the book is hashtag van life murders. Is it one continual story from beginning to end, or are there multiple stories within it? How did you tie the whole book together? What's the narrative, I guess?
So the main character is a young girl in her 20s who doesn't enjoy her life and goes through a breakup and then decides she wants to hit the road. So she buys a van and hits the road, wants to travel. And I actually have the character travel along the path that we took when we started our RV journey. So the places I have her stay in the book are actually places we stayed at. So that's sort of when the real part comes in there. These are real campgrounds and real locations that are in there. And she sort of realizes that along her journey, there are other van life girls her age that are going missing. So it's sort of, I would describe it almost like a Nancy Drew, where this main character starts diving into these girls that are missing and finds out that they're being murdered along the same path. So she's on a hunt to figure out what's going on, who's doing this, and then you'll have to read the book to find out the ending. But that's so generally she's, becomes this detective, but that's sort of how it's all tied together is she's figuring out who's murdering these girls.
What's an example of something that happened to you guys that made it into the book?
The most notable one, because I still think about it to this day, Scott and I have conversations about it. When we were in Washington, I can't right now remember it. Oh, it was called Snag Lake. And this was up in Washington. I did change the location of this one in the book, but the story is completely real where we found this lake. We'd been traveling all day. It was one of those days where you're like, just get me to my campsite. I just want to be there. I don't care where it is. We found this lake. Seemed to be no one was there. It was beautiful. It was a normal campground, like in the forest. We found this awesome site. It was just trickling rain because we were in Washington. And we're like, this is awesome. We got this place to ourselves. It's beautiful. It's quiet. It's peaceful. And we happened to notice there was a trail that actually went around the whole lake. So we're like, well, let's go check this out. This is cool. Go on this trail through the trees, thinking this is so beautiful and peaceful. I just love it here. Come around almost to the end of the complete circle of the lake. And we see this campsite that is just mangled. It's, a complete mess. One of those sites that you see that you're like, somebody is living out here for sure, full time living out here. Because the table had all of these cans that were emptied and tipped over, all this Tupperware that looked dirty but full. The complete table was full of all this junk. And there was trash bags hanging off the side, and there was a one-person tent that was set up there, and then like a fairly nice bike leaning up against this table. But also the thing that was weird to us, other than everything scattered, was there was like, I want to say it was piano wire type hanging, like the whole border of the campsite, they had lined with piano wire. So it wasn't set up, it looked like, to hang clothes. So we were thinking maybe it was to keep animals out, but the whole feeling of it was very eerie once you saw it. And there was nobody there. There was one of those tickets sitting on it saying, you need to evacuate the site. You've been here too long when the Forest Service comes through. But just the feeling of it was very creepy. And the fact that it was trickling rain and one of those things where you feel like you thought you were alone and found this great spot. And then all of a sudden you question if you are alone. And then your mind starts turning of, well, where is this person? And what happened to this person? And so it just, it was very strange. It was weird. And it definitely made our peaceful campsite no longer peaceful anymore.
Did you ever see anybody there?
No, we did not. We stayed there, I think, for about 4 or 5 days. On the third, I think it was the third day, Scott did call the Forest Service. Even though they had a ticket already on there, he called them and said, like, there's this site here. We haven't seen anybody. Just want to let you know, in case somebody was supposed to be returning to this site, nobody has, just because it was such a mess and it looked like everything was left behind. So it was a very strange situation, and we ended up leaving the next day. And still to this day, we're very curious where that person was or what happened to that site.
Never know.
We will never know.
So what was the hardest part about writing a book on the road?
Coming up with the story. And I say that because unlike writing a book where you're just talking about your travels or everything from day to day that's going on when you're traveling, when you're writing a fiction book, you have to come up with the details and the characters and the next steps. And it was a little more challenging than I thought it would be. And I think part of that is because it was my first book and I'm somebody who wants things to be perfect, which I'm trying to learn that that's just not possible. It can't be perfect. But it was hard for me to sit down and write it because I would write something and then be like, I don't like that, and erase it and do it again and then do it again. And so it was a lot harder to actually come up with the storyline from chapter to chapter and what was going to happen next, and then how you bring all the characters together. I think there was a lot more pieces that turned out to be more challenging than I was expecting it to be.
Logistically speaking, how did you write it? Did you just open a Word document and just start typing?
Google Docs.
Okay.
That is how I did the whole thing, was through Google Docs, because I didn't want to do just Microsoft in case, God forbid, something happens and it all gets erased and then you're back to square one.
Okay.
But at least on Google Docs, you could access that through other computers. And that way Scott could easily log into and, read and keep up with what I was writing along the way. But Google Docs is where we did absolutely everything.
So you've written the book, Scott's looked it over, done all the edits and suggestions that he thinks. What's the next step?
Next step was finding an editor. That was also a little tricky because since it was our first book and we didn't want to spend a wild amount of money because we were trying to save during this time, we went to Upwork and tried to find a couple different editors so that way we got different views. And we sort of chose different price lines too, so different experience levels of editors. So we started with the lowest experience, had them look it over, hired someone a step above, had them look it over, and then did the top one last, and she looked it over. And that was the same way. We had them all log into the Google Docs and edit all through there, so that way we could just see everything that was happening, get their suggestions all in one place, and sort of compare what each one of them was saying. We also tried to pick editors that were a little bit on the younger side, just so that way that they were the type of readers we would be having too. So they would read it sort of from the mindset that what our target audience would be reading from. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was sort of hard to find an editor. I mean, there's so many people out there, and being new to this, we were sort of just winging it as we went. And some editors we realized we liked, others we didn't like very much. It was an experience. I don't know if we would do it the same again or different, but we definitely learned some things along the way, I'd say.
So now it's been edited by 4 people. What's the step after that?
So after that was figuring out exactly how to publish it.
Okay.
And luckily, Amazon makes things very easy these days. And we publish through Amazon KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. And we chose this option because, first of all, they make it very easy for you to apply for and to do this. And the part we like the most is it happens quicker than if you were to go through a big publisher, which can be challenging being a new writer to reach out to a publisher and have them want to actually publish your book. Also on Amazon, when somebody orders your book, they just print it as they're ordered, compared to if you did it a different way and they say, okay, here's 100 copies, go try to sell these. So it was nice that through Amazon, we didn't have to worry about getting packages of books anywhere.
Mhm.
We could just do it as people ordered them and they would just push them out for us.
And so is it hardcover, softcover?
It's a soft cover
Yeah,
and it is also on Kindle.
that's really cool. So do you recall if the book, for example, sells for $10, how much of that do you get through publishing with Amazon's publishing service?
So they break it up about if you're doing the physical copy of the book, if it's like mine's, I'll go off of it's $15. So five of that will go to the Amazon, five of that will go to the publishing part, and then five would go to me. So basically just breaks up evenly between,
Hmm.
which I think a lot of people don't realize just because when you do see a price, I think you automatically, a lot of people who don't know this world or selling things are like, oh, so I bought your book. Did you get $15? I'm like, well, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
Like this has to go to other people. So no, I don't get $15. That would be awesome if it worked that way. But the return on Kindle is actually a lot better. Whereas if I'm selling it for like $5, I'll get, I believe it's about 80% of that. And
Hmm.
only the other 20% would go to Amazon.
Yeah, a lot less work for them, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you always were interested in writing. You wrote a book. Is it everything you thought it would be? To be a published author?
It is and it isn't because it is so great. I mean, it feels amazing to say I accomplished this goal. This was something I thought about for a long time, and I'm so happy I finally did it because it's one of those things where you could talk about it all you want, but it doesn't feel accomplished until you actually sit down and do it. I
Hmm.
mean, you got to sit down and take those steps. So I still sometimes can't believe that I did write a book. It is weird to pick it up sometimes and think like, oh, I read that. Or when I go to my friend's house and see it sitting on their shelf or at Barnes and Nobles and it's sitting on the shelf, it's like, oh, I did that. I did that. That's amazing. And I thought when I wrote a book, I would be like, okay, great. I wrote a book. Let me write 15 more and, become some great author. And this would be my career path and I would love it. And I don't think it turned out to be my calling like I thought it was going to be. Do I still love writing? Yes, I do still love writing. I do want to keep writing, but I don't think I want to be an author as my career path anymore as much as I thought it was going to be.
And do you think that has anything to do with the type of writing you're doing?
Maybe a little bit. I do think writing fiction is harder. I do think it's a little more challenging. I'm sure it's different for everybody, but for me personally, I think it was harder. I think a hard part was also I have a hard time just sitting down and looking at a screen for a long period of time.
Hmm.
I'm totally someone, and Scott totally gets at me for this. If it's really nice day outside, I have the hardest time sitting inside and getting work done at the computer. I need to be outside doing something, even if it's doing physical work, whatever. If I'm out there digging holes, I just need to be outside. And that's the hard part for me is I think I need to be doing something that's out there and physical rather than just sitting down and typing on a computer.
Hmm. Do you think you'll write another book?
I do. I did start it. I did start another book. And then, some other things happened in our lives that sort of twisted the gears into a different direction. So the book's sort of on hold right now while we're working on new projects, but it's still there. And I do still occasionally will open it up and work a little bit on it. But I think that'll be a little more in the future that it will come out.
Hmm. So looking back, if there's one thing that you could give as a piece of advice to someone who is interested in wanting to write a book, you 3 years ago, what advice would you give them?
That you just got to do it. Stop thinking about it. I can't remember which author said this, but there's a quote that I still think about all the time. And it's that you can't find your passion thinking about it in your head. So you can talk about writing a book all you want. You can have all these ideas all you want, but you're not going to know how it's going to turn out until you actually sit down and do it.
Hmm.
Whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether you hate it, whether you love it, you're not going to know until you actually sit down and do it. And I think that's the hardest part. So I had thought about writing a book for so many years, and I wish I would have done it sooner. And once I actually sat down and started getting into it, it was like, okay, I can do this. I can actually write a book. But I think that's the hardest part is just jumping into it. And I would tell people you can't, stop thinking about it. Just do it. You got to take action and just do it.
Mm-hmm. You wrote the book, you got it edited, it's up on Amazon, ready to hit print when someone orders or download on Kindle.
Mhm.
How did you guys tackle the marketing? You said you didn't have a huge social media following to just push it out to your own groups. What
Mhm.
routes did you take? What worked? What didn't work?
So we looked into, you can advertise through Amazon. So we did a couple ads through Amazon and through Facebook. I created a Facebook page for myself as an author, did some marketing through there, and a lot of it was through our friends and family, word of mouth. And we also reached out to a couple people on Instagram that had bigger followings in the book world. Like I think it was hashtag bookstagram is what it was. And we found a couple people that just share books on their page and sent a book their direction, and they would review it and post it on their page. And that helped a lot. We did get a lot of people from them that would reach out and find the book. So it was hard. I think maybe the ads on Facebook and Amazon didn't work as well as we thought they would. I think for us, the route was better to actually reach out to people that would review our book and then share it with their friends and family and their followers. That was just easier. I think when I think myself, when I'm scrolling through Facebook, I do kind of just scroll past ads and I'm like, I stop showing me ads. I don't want this. So I think that didn't work as well as we thought it would. But reaching out via social media was, I think, the path that worked the best for us.
Mm-hmm. How did you come up with the cover art?
We had an idea of what we wanted it to look like, at least, little details. And we did 99 Designs, which is a website that has just a bunch of different creators, graphic designers that are on there, sort of like I would compare it to Upwork a little bit. But what you do is you put your job posting out there and you will get, oh gosh, I don't even know how many people we had submit work, maybe 100 or more people submitted artwork. So you sort of put out what you're looking for, people submit, and then you slowly will just narrow down what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we got down to that, we picked the one person and we had to make little adjustments. And after that, he was the one that we were like, okay, we like the way this looks and we'll go with that. It is a little more expensive, I'd say, than doing Upwork. I mean, I think it depends what type of person you're looking for, but I believe you pay like a specific price and then all those people come in and submit, and then the winner, whoever you choose, is the one that will get paid in the end. But I don't know how much of that goes to the website or how much that goes to the designer.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's pretty suspenseful, pretty creepy cover art. It's a foggy night in
Yeah,
the middle of the woods with a van headlights shining down the road, and it definitely gives you that feeling of looking over your shoulder.
we like the feeling of it. Yeah, I don't know now if I would change it or make it different, but I like the overall look of it. It definitely, I think, fits the theme of the book for sure.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. All right, so you wrote this book, you published it, you got it out there. Amazon's printing it, so you don't have to carry any stock with you. You don't have to have physical books with you. Oh, I do have a question. Did you ever just
Yes.
leave a copy of the book in the campground laundry rooms? Like how people leave free stuff at the laundromat? Did you ever just tuck your book out there?
Yes, yes, we did. And actually, so Scott is so much more bold than I am, which
Uh-huh.
is funny because it's like I wrote this book, but then I was almost afraid to do stuff like that. And the one that still to this day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that, is I think we were in California at the airport. We had visited his family in California, and we were at the airport in one of those bookshops, and he put my book on the shelf at the airport. And he took, I think we have the picture of it somewhere too. He took a picture, but we're in there and I didn't know he had the book with him until I saw him slide it on the shelf. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. And I turned my head away like I didn't know what was happening. And he was like, it's not like we're stealing something, like we're leaving it here for people to get. So I don't know if it is still on that bookshelf or if someone tried to buy it. I have no idea, but he definitely sprinkled my book places.
Nice, nice. That's really cool. So you wrote the book, you're starting to get a little income from that, and then you've got another book in the works, but it's on halt because you guys have another exciting project. Give me a little insight into that.
Our newest project that happened really fast, that sort of took us by surprise almost how fast it happened, was we bought a campground in Montrose, Colorado. Well, when I say campground, we're going to build a campground on a lot that we bought in Montrose, Colorado.
It sounds a lot like a campground that my friends Heath and Alyssa were gonna do. Is that any at all related?
Oh, it might be very related. Yes. Yes. We are so thankful for the summit that we went to last year because if we did not go to this summit, we would not be where we are today. 100% we owe it to the summit. Last year, went to the summit, and we were honestly debating if we wanted to go to the summit. And eventually we did. We were like, yes, you know what? Let's do it. We got nothing to lose. And Heath and Alyssa had, I don't know exactly when they had bought this property in Montrose. I think it was still fairly new because it just has a schoolhouse on it. But other than that, it's just land. It sits on old farming land. So there's nothing out here. Nothing out here. And they decided that they wanted to take a different course with their lives. And luckily, we shared with them that we were very interested in building a campground similar to what they were doing by creating a co working space geared towards the younger generation of travelers. And they reached out to us, and Scott took no time at all to say, yes, we are very interested. Let me pull some things together and see if we can buy this place. He did it pretty quick. And I don't know if I believed that it was actually going to happen until he said, okay, this campground is ours and we're moving to Montrose.
You now are campground owners in addition to being an author.
Yes. We really wanted a campground, but we both thought this was going to be years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that these are lines crossed with Heath and Alyssa, it couldn't have been more perfect. And we're so thankful that they did. And we have a lot of work ahead of us, but we are so excited about this next project. But definitely had to put the writing on hold because this is going to completely take over our lives for probably the next year, 2 years, maybe 3. There's a lot to do, but we're very excited for it.
Yeah. And so are we as the RV community. We're having the summit at your campground. So we're excited to bring the summit back to Montrose, and then we're going to be having a bit more development by that time than there was last year. We're excited to get back. Coley and the boys and I stopped over on some of our travels and hung out with you and Scott and got to play with some heavy machinery, but we're excited to be back there this fall and see what you guys have done with the place and fill the schoolhouse with folks for the next version of the RVE Summit.
Yes, we're very excited. We talk about it all the time, and we're working hard to get it up to the next level. So we're super excited for the summit to be here and to see everybody back here. And we feel like everything has come full circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty interesting to think about how your dream of being a writer, you can directly tie it to now being a campground owner, because it probably would not have happened if you hadn't wrote a book and then decided to get involved in the entrepreneurial community and then go to the summit. And yeah, that's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Connecting the dots.
Absolutely. I am a full preacher for the RV Entrepreneur Summit.
Mm-hmm. All right. So if someone's interested in some van life suspense, where is the best place for them to go pick up your book?
Amazon, just search #VanLifeMurders, or you can search my name, Taylor Cluster. I do also have a website, super easy, just vanlifemurders.com. You can also find it on our Instagram.
Cool. And that's the hashtag symbol, not the word hashtag. So if you guys are looking for it, just type in the hashtag symbol, Van Life Murders. Awesome. Taylor, thank you for taking the time out of your day to jump on the podcast with me. This is a cool story. And I think there's a lot of people that have books in them that just need a little bit more example and push to just open that Google Doc and start writing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Taylor. She's a really cool woman, and her and Scott are doing some fantastic things with the campground property in Montrose, Colorado. I'm super excited to be headed back there in September for the RV Entrepreneur Summit. I think it's really cool how you can connect the dots from jumping into an RV, traveling around the country, seeing the sights, deciding to write a book, becoming a published author, living that dream and checking that item off of your bucket list, and how that goal then led to the next goal of them now building a campground. It's really interesting to hear how Taylor's experiences on the road played into the storyline of the book. And I gotta say, when I hear hashtag Van Life Murders, I definitely think along the lines of what Taylor was talking about with the problem with the title, is that people think, oh, I don't need to be adding any more suspense into my mindset or my imagination while living on the road. I think it's really cool how items of safety on the road and added them into the storyline, kind of giving examples of, hey, this is what you should be doing, this is what you should be thinking about, while also tying it into a fictional storyline. So if you're interested in reading Taylor's book, #VanLifeMurders, go ahead and check that out. You can go to vanlifemurders.com or head over to Amazon and type in #VanLifeMurders. I will also put links to all of her social media stuff in the episode description. And if you'd like to connect with anyone else in the RV entrepreneur community, head on over to the Facebook group, rventrepreneur.com/Facebook group. If you have a question for Taylor or anyone else who's been on the show or just want to leave us a voicemail, head on over to the rventrepreneur.com/voicemail and you can leave us a voicemail. And finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can fill out the guest form at the rventrepreneur.com/guest form. We'd love to hear how you are financing your travels and living life on the road. That's all I have for today. Until next time, I'll see you on the road.